write about food because there is a deeply gendered dimension to this particular form of structural violence that is affecting Indigenous peoples in West Papua alongside their diverse forest ecologies. As a result of deforestation, there has been a profound loss of access to previously forest-derived foodstuffs, many of which were key sources of protein for many local communities in the form of, for instance, wild boar, cassowaries, a range of different bird species, but also fruits, nuts, tubers, and most importantly, the sago palm, from which Indigenous Marin communities derive their staple starch, the sago flour. Now, this reduced access to food has given rise to all kinds of nutritional and health problems, malnutrition, stunting, growth challenges, infertility in women, high rates of anemia, and so forth. But it's not just these physical impacts that are affecting Indigenous communities. There are all kinds of culturally shaped ways in which food insecurity is being experienced, conceptualized, and contested. And a lot of that has to do with the ways in which Indigenous communities in West Papua understand food through relationships of nourishment between human peoples and forest beings, plants, animals, elements, and ecosystems. To lose access to forest foods is not just to lose nutrition, it is to lose all kinds of deeply meaningful, emotionally charged, historically anchored, and culturally shaped relationships to forest species and forest ecologies. And it is in these nourishing ecologies that Marin's sense of identity, belonging, and sociality within a more than human world are rooted. Not just that, what we've seen with the expansion of monocrops has been the substitution of forest foods with industrially processed and imported foodstuffs. For instance, instant noodles, rice, biscuits, fizzy drinks, and so forth. Now, not only, of course, are these foods far less nutritionally balanced and rich than formerly derived forest foods, they are also widely associated by Indigenous Marin communities with a modern capitalistic world, which is very, very different to their own subsistence-based, collective, communitarian ethos and the underlying relationships of eating and being fed that accompany that collective communitarian ethos of eating well together and living well together. Many Marin talk about processed foods as bland, tasteless. No one knows where they come from, who produced them. No one knows whose sweat or labor went into procuring or preparing them. And so these foods are devoid of all kinds of meanings that, in contrast, forest foods accrue their significance from. Now, these food systems, transforming food systems, most directly impact on women because women see themselves as the primary food providers for their families and for their children. Women derive a huge sense of pride and of dignity from knowing how to engage with the forest, knowing what foods to procure, what animals can be hunted, what fruits can be harvested at what times of the year. When the forest disappears, these profoundly meaningful sources of knowledge, gendered knowledge, also disappear. And in the process, women are finding themselves deprived of their source of identity.
1 minute more, you have.
1 minute? Thank you so much. Now, resistance, of course, is also part of this story. Women are at the forefront of Indigenous land rights advocacy movements in West Papua. They are playing a key role in educating their children in the meaning of forest ecologies and forest foods. They are also particularly involved in processes of consent seeking, pushing against corporate and government activities that deny Indigenous communities their right to free, prior, and informed consent. So there is hope on the ground. This hope takes the form of collective, organized action, but it also takes the form of everyday, small acts of resistance in the choices people make about what they eat, who they eat with, who they share food with. So resistance takes organized scales, but it also takes micro, everyday sorts of forms. In these plantation ecologies, then, we're seeing all kinds of meaningful relations of nourishment being severed, but we're also seeing Indigenous resilience, survivance, and creativity that is being led primarily by women who, again, see themselves as primary food providers and bearers of justice, sustainability, and care for Marin generations, both present and to come. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sophie, for such a nice, inspiring presentation. And I would like to introduce the next speaker. This is David Nandin. He's a PhD agriculture economics and has a vast experience of working on tribal and forest issues. And Devjit has done many policy research for the restoration and management of the forest. He has been with Nabrashna, it's an NGO based in India, for the last 2 decades and look after the projects and the overall management of the field and team. And Devjit will present the resistance, autonomy, and reclaiming forests, how Baiga women transformed and marginalized indigenous communities in India. Devjit, the floor is yours.
Hi. Can I share the screen? Would you allow me to share the screen? Hello. Hi everyone. Good evening. This is actually a story of how does it move? The indigenous communities who have been struggling against the plantations, and in India and in central India, particularly against the biofuels, which is coming in a big way in the state as well as in the country. So I basically share their story about what they have been fighting against the industrial plantations for their livelihood. And then again, industrial plantations or monoculture plantation means taking away their land, taking away their resources, and taking away their livelihood. And in return, the state earns a lot of revenue from the forest and illegal forest logging and all these things. So the women have fought against all these things, the illegal forest logging, the industrial plantations, biofuels, Jatropha plantations. So women have fought against this. And that this meant that to protect their biodiversity, to protect their forest, they had to struggle a lot. And for this, they had to lose their livelihood because they are basically bamboo craftsmen. So bamboo have gone out of protected areas. Bamboos have gone out due to industrial plantations and monocultures. So that have shattered their traditional livelihoods. And even the forest department and the state department even went
Sorry
on to
that
thresh their.
interrupt you.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
Here the people is managing your slides. Please just tell them next slide, next slide. Thanks.
Okay. Can you move to the next slide, please? Yeah, here the women have because I told that illegal plantations, illegal fellings are there. A lot of illegal fellings are there when there is monoculture and commercial plantations. So women, even to protect their livelihood, even to protect their land, they have gone to seize the wood that have been illegally cut by the forest department and the administration. So Bega women have fought this. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is again the biofuel plantation Jatropha, because Chhattisgarh, our state in India, that have spent around 600 crores rupees on Jatropha plantation in last 6-7 years without producing a single liter of oil. So basically, Jatropha plantation have been done on the disputed land, like the indigenous peoples land who have not been given land for since ages. So their land have been forcibly taken away for Jatropha plantations and other biofuel plantations. Next. So this is the basically their livelihood, bamboo livelihood that they have been making this sort of bamboo from bamboos. And for this, for stopping the forest department for fighting against the Jatropha plantations, their houses were thrashed off, and these women were also sent to the jail in the Bilaspur jail along with the men for resisting the monoculture plantations. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is basically the elderly also who are mostly dependent on the forest products. Their livelihood also goes away with the monoculture plantations. Next slide, please. So women have gone to measure their forest, exists there in their forest, what trees they need to be plant, what sort of biodiversity they need to reclaim. So the women have measured their forest, they have assessed their forest, and then made plans to replant the fruit trees and vegetable trees in their forest. Next slide, please. This is how they have challenged their whole, they have challenged the periphery of the protected areas. They have challenged the whole administration that we want to protect the forest, we want to protect our biodiversity, and we won't allow the monoculture to come up. Next slide, please. So they have also made territorial claims of their forest. So they made the territorial claims of their forest, that this is our indigenous land. From this we protect our custom. From this we get our livelihood and we get our agriculture land. So these are the territorial areas we want to protect, and these are the territorial areas we want to reforest as well. So in this way they made their claims also for territorial forest. Next slide, please. So they went on to do nursery management. Next slide, please. Even plantations in their forest, inside the protected areas also, making the plantations with around in the initial 2-3 years, they have planted around 1,200 different species that have been by listing the species that grow in the forest and then planting the species. This is a picture of in Chuya, where they have taken up 500 hectares of land for plantation, planting around 1,200 species of different species, which are benefit for them. Next slide, please.
1 minute left, Devjit.
Yeah, okay, next slide. This is the plantation in the protected areas. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So before that, one more slide. Yes, you skipped. Yeah. So they also made seed balls, because spreading the plantation within the forest areas is very difficult. So in different seed balls, ball of seeds they made they made ball in the mud and then put seeds in that, and they threw it in the forest area for plantation. So that was a very good example of how they could capture with their own biodiversity and with their own tree plantations and different plantations. Thank you.
Thank you, Devjit. Thank you for such nice, impressive presentation and work of Baiga women in India.
Yeah.
So after these two presentations, we invite our participants to use the Q&A window to just send your questions. I already saw one question for Devjit. Devjit, could you explain please
Yeah,
a bit more?
yeah.
Where is this experience? It seems not clear where has been developed
This
this
is
experience.
in central part of India. We called it a state of Chhattisgarh. So very new state, 20 years old state. So this is in Chhattisgarh, where the this is bordering the older division of Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh. So it is a central part of India.
Thanks. Sophie, could you also explain a bit more where is your exactly the experience you present?
Sure. So the experience I present draws from experiences of communities who live in the south coast area of West Papua province. Papua, when I say West Papua, I mean the Indonesian-controlled half of the island of New Guinea in the west. And these communities live in forested areas just near the south coast of West Papua province.
Thanks, Sophie, for the clarification. So please, we are waiting your questions. Just write on the chat of in the QA questions. So I also for Devjit, I have a question, and this is, what is the impact of women sent to jail in India? Devjit?
Actually, they came up very strongly again. These women have been displaced 2-3 times. They had multiple displacement from the various projects, from plantations, from protected areas, from dams and everything. So they were very desperate to catch up the whatever land they had. So they went to the jail, and then they came back very strongly, and they started fighting against the forest department and the administration, urging them to give their territorial rights and urging them right to plantation and right to their livelihood. So it's a very strong women coming out when they are coming out of the jail.
Thanks. And also there is another question saying this, how to enable these forest communities' rights under the framework and implementation of land claims and give CAMPA funding to Gram Sabats.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
actually CFR they have to make the CFR rights claim. These are already existing claims which they have to make. So these women have already made the claims of territorial rights to the district collector and do the district administration. So till now they haven't, on papers they haven't got this rights, but the act says that when you make the claims, your status quo would be maintained. So in that way, the women have now gone on to make the forest management committees and all these things. So in that way, they have at least got their rights by making the claims. And secondly, about the CAMPA funding is coming in a larger way in our area, but it's for the monoculture, and CAMPA funding is not for other biodiverse. So women are a bit reluctant to take CAMPA funds for the plantations and all these things. They say that whatever seeds we have, we will protect our seeds, we will collect our seeds and restore our seeds, and not the government seeds or the government plantations we will allow to come in our area.
Thanks, Devjit. And I have a question for Sophie. How do we quantify the work of women in food production and tree plantation in monetary terms?
That's a very good question. I was reading it and thinking about it as my colleague was responding. I think it's really challenging to actually put a figure to the food that's produced. At the same time, a lot of the indigenous Marin women that I am working with are actively trying to come up with quantitative measurements for what these foods are worth in light of how long it takes to produce them, the amount of resources required to harvest or process them, particularly when it comes to sago starch, which is quite a laborious endeavor that is primarily undertaken by women. So there's a limited, the sort of, selling power of women to determine the quantitative cost of these items is very, very limited because they're subject to local and national market forces. But there are all kinds of interesting small-scale economic alternative livelihood strategies that are being developed to try to put a quantitative figure on these foods and the processes required to produce them.
Thanks, Sophie. Maybe we will answer two last questions more. There are so many questions, and don't worry, you can write also our presenters, our speakers to answer your questions. But there is one question also for Devjit. Who owns the biofuel plantations?
Who owns the?
Biofuel plantations.
It's the government. It's the government coming up in a big way for biofuels.
Okay, thanks for you.
So and that are done in the disputed land. So the indigenous communities who are holding the land for generations, they have been dislodged from their lands. If they don't resist, in many areas, if they don't resist, they are being evicted from their land, and forcibly biofuel plantations are being done.
Okay, thanks for your answer. Maybe a last question more. It's for both of you. It seems that human rights of indigenous peoples, women violence, etc., happen in this forest plantation. So the question is, what is the best way to secure their forest and ecological rights?
Yeah, Sophie.
Thank you. Great question. The big question, I mean, for me, it boils down to the need for governments, corporations to recognize that indigenous peoples know the forest best and that they have sustainably used forest resources since time immemorial, and that if there are any conservation or forestry experts, it is indigenous peoples. And for indigenous peoples, this knowledge is not just a science or an academic domain, it is a way of life, it is an everyday practice, it is a culture. And for that to be recognized requires legal reform, it requires governance reforms, it requires anchoring all kinds of conversations about what the fate of the forest is, with indigenous peoples guiding and leading those conversations through the principle of consent. So I would say that institutional transformations, both bottom up and top down, I think are absolutely critical.
Thanks, Sophie.
I would like to add, if you see the whole state and the violence and the land grabbing process, and in the recent times, if you see in you have to give land to the women, you have to give the resources to the women to manage that, because a large malnourishment is going on in the area, and it's always the indigenous community who are largely malnourished. The other communities are not malnourished. So if you stop them from going into forest, accessing their forest products, the violence increases, the state violence, the domestic violence, everything increases. So if you give the land rights, if you give the resources rights to the women, only they have to be engaged, they have to be employed, and they have to be overcome malnourishment, they have to overcome health issues. So these are all things that have to be given the complete rights to the women for overcoming all these things.
Thanks very much to both of you for your answers. We still have many questions, but we will send to you and you can answer to the respective people who are sending these questions. So we will move now to the other side of our world. This is Chile. So our next speakers is Constanza Ramos and Camila Romero. Constanza is a sociologist and studied at the University of Concepción in Chile. Currently, she has joined Colectivo Viento Sur since 2018, where she is devoting or developing her professional mission, basically reading the reality from a critical way and from political ecological approach. So Constanza of Camila will present first experience. Camila, please could you introduce yourself?
Por acá vamos a saludarle primero a todas las compañeras, compañeros, hermanos, hermanas que nos escuchan desde distintas latitudes del planeta. Un gran saludo a todos ustedes, a su resistencia, a sus territorios. Es un agrado poder compartir con ustedes y permitir que nuestras semillas vuelen a través del mundo y nuestra palabra caiga en su cultivo para que pueda brotar y podamos fortalecer nuestras luchas en tiempos tan complejos que nos toca vivir. Bueno, mi nombre es Camila Romero. En esta instancia vamos a hablar con mi compañera Constanza Ramos, quien también va a tomar la palabra. Nosotras habitamos en el territorio costero de Valdivia. Valdivia es una ciudad que queda al sur, hoy en día Chile, pero territorio ancestral mapuche. Hoy en día se llevan a cabo varias reivindicaciones culturales, territoriales en ese territorio mapuche, las Quenche, que es el pueblo del mar, y desde ahí es de donde nosotras hemos estado organizándonos también desde el territorio y con otras organizaciones, en este caso el colectivo Viento Sur, en el cual nosotras participamos, y quisiéramos compartir con ustedes parte de algunas reflexiones que han surgido en la conversación con otras compañeras, compañeros de otros territorios también, más allá de Valdivia, en este caso la región del Biobío, que queda un poco más al norte. Nosotros estamos en la región de los ríos, y conectando ambos territorios es que hemos observado, reflexionado un poco en torno a los impactos del modelo forestal chileno en la vida de las comunidades y principalmente en la vida de las mujeres. Entonces esto que vamos a compartir con ustedes es resultado de las reflexiones junto a otras compañeras, compañeros del colectivo Viento Sur y también de aquellos territorios, principalmente Arauco y Valdivia. Un saludo al colectivo Viento Sur también, que están ahí presentes. Y ahora mi compañera Danza, si quisiera saludar también. A ver si puede. Ahí está.
Invitamos entonces a Constanza. Constanza, could you please show up? The floor is yours. Constanza, we cannot hear you.
Nuestras disculpas, esperamos que pueda solucionarlo, si nos puedes dar un minutito.
Mientras Constanza arregla su micrófono, ¿podrías hablarnos algo más de vuestras luchas, Camila?
Claro, sí. Como les contaba, nuestras reflexiones sobre los impactos del modelo forestal en Chile, en la vida de las mujeres, viene de reflexiones conjuntas, tanto no solo mujeres, sino hombres, mujeres. Ahí está la Connie.
¿Se escucha?
Sí, se escucha.
Ah, entonces era porque estaba con audífonos. ¿Ahí?
Sí, Connie. Ahora sí.
Bueno, más que nada como introducir un poco al artículo que nosotras como colectivo realizamos. El artículo se divide en dos.
Constanza, no se te escucha mucho. ¿Podrías acercarte al micrófono, por favor?
Ahí,
Ahí, sí.
ya. El artículo se concentra en dos territorios en Chile, en el sur de Chile. Uno es la región del Biobío y el otro es la región de los ríos, en Valdivia. Cabe destacar que en la región del Biobío es una zona de sacrificio en el modelo forestal en Chile. Y la región de Valdivia es incipiente en la problemática forestal. El modelo forestal en Chile tiene sus inicios en la privatización de los territorios desde la dictadura hasta ahora. En la instauración de este modelo neoliberal, como con una retórica democrática. En esta retórica democrática de la instauración del modelo neoliberal en Chile, hay una privatización de todos los servicios, tanto desde la salud, la educación y los recursos naturales. En esta profundización neoliberal también existe un aumento del gasto social que finalmente este gasto social se transmite a través de privatizaciones. Y hay una completa apertura también al mercado financiero internacional a través de los tratados de libre comercio en que el Estado financia las deudas de los privados. Y por último, en esta instauración del modelo neoliberal en Chile, hay una profundización de las políticas de las concesiones de los bienes comunes. Por lo tanto, hay una precarización que se ve en la vida de la gente común. Y a esto se le suma la privatización del agua acá en Chile. Es el único lugar acá en Latinoamérica que el agua es privada. No como propiedad privada, sino que a través de concesiones en que se otorgan derechos de agua a privados de manera perpetua y garantizada por décadas. Entonces, el modelo forestal en Chile es el segundo después de la minería en la extracción de materias primas. Como decía, en el Golfo de Arauco, en la región del Biobío, se está instalando la ampliación de la celulosa Arauco, que es el proyecto MAPA. Es una modernización de esta celulosa con una producción que va a abordar 2.100 millones de toneladas de celulosa. Y existe, por ejemplo, como una imagen mundial de Chile desde el Banco Mundial, en que nosotros como territorio tenemos una fuerte promoción del bosque, pero este bosque se camufla con el monocultivo. Entonces, finalmente el Banco Mundial otorga cifras que no son reales de lo que es bosque realmente nativo y lo que es monocultivo. El último dato que nosotros tenemos como desde el Estado de Chile, que es la CONAF, para la región de los ríos, hay 5 millones de hectáreas reforestadas de solo monocultivo y solo 50 hectáreas de bosque nativo. Y no queda claro en qué parte están. Más que nada, bueno, y este fomento del bosque, que al final no se sabe si es bosque de monocultivo o bosque de plantación, quedan instaladas en 2 leyes que son desde el Estado. La 701, que es el fomento del fomento forestal, y la ley 20.283, que es la recuperación del bosque nativo y el fomento forestal. Pero queda la imagen de que se ha plantado bosque nativo, pero la máxima plantaciones son de monocultivo. Bueno, ahora le dejo con Camila para que desarrolle más el tema de la problemática con las mujeres acá.
Gracias, Connie. Bueno, cualquier duda más adelante nos pueden consultar. Bueno, en el fondo la historia que nos comenta Connie, que es el contexto en el que se desarrolla la industria forestal en Chile, esto ha producido distintas consecuencias negativas en los territorios y en la vida de las personas que viven y que han vivido allí, porque muchos han tenido que irse debido a la explotación intensiva que ha habido de la tierra, de las fuentes de vida. Tal es el caso de Arauco, zona de sacrificio, como comentaba Constanza, zona de sacrificio debido a la contaminación grave que ha habido de los ecosistemas del territorio marino por la industria de la celulosa y también de la plantación de monocultivos de pino. Y también en Valdivia las plantaciones de pino y la presencia de la celulosa que ha generado contaminación también del río, tal es el caso del año 2004 en que se contaminó el río producto del vertimiento de los residuos de la planta de celulosa, generó la muerte de miles de cisnes y hasta el día de hoy un desequilibrio ecológico. Lo que nosotros...
Tienes 2 minutos, Camila, para terminar.
Lo que es importante mencionar es que desde las comunidades, principalmente mapuche, no hay una separación entre la naturaleza con la vida en sociedad. Es dependencia, de codependencia. Entonces, mientras afecte, obviamente el ecosistema afecta fuertemente nuestra vida y nuestra posibilidad de desarrollarnos, de cultivar. ¿Y por qué impacta principalmente a las mujeres? Porque el extractivismo instala un modo de producción que afecta no solo los territorios, sino los cuerpos. Y también instalándose en los modos de relacionarnos entre las personas, entre hombres y mujeres, y se reproduce la desigualdad al interior de las comunidades, de los pueblos, y tanto en el trabajo también, con una carga centrada en lo masculino, siendo las mujeres encargadas de la reproducción de la vida, del cuidado, y en este panorama, en este escenario de devastación, donde es fundamental el cuidado de la vida ante la escasez de agua, de alimentos, de la salud, es que las mujeres tienen que enfrentar estas situaciones junto a los niños, a las niñas, y sumado también a la violencia policial, institucional que se vive en los territorios. Aquí con el Estado de Chile tenemos un fuerte conflicto debido a la respuesta que nos ha dado, principalmente ha sido la militarización de los territorios, muy poco el diálogo, muy poco la escucha hacia las voces de los pueblos mapuche, de los pueblos indígenas y de las comunidades también pobladoras conscientes del territorio chileno. Y es frente a eso lo que nos enfrentamos hoy en día, a seguir manteniendo nuestras luchas en que las mujeres cumplen un rol fundamental, como les mencionaba, desde lo cotidiano, ya que lo cotidiano es político, se vuelve una resistencia, la resistencia del cuidado. Y es desde ahí donde nosotras seguimos en pie de lucha, apoyándonos también, y hoy en día estamos formando una articulación de ambos territorios, de la región del Biobío y la región de los ríos, una articulación para visibilizar estos impactos del modelo forestal internacionalmente, ojalá, así que ojalá poder unirnos también para visibilizar estos conflictos, las situaciones que enfrentamos hoy en día, y también las estrategias que llevamos, porque tenemos estrategias, estamos en un momento de reivindicar también nuestra política. Entonces es fundamental también fortalecer nuestras propias estrategias desde los pueblos y desde la tierra. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Camila y Constanza, por vuestra presentación. Vamos a regresar con ustedes con las preguntas más luego. I would like to invite this time to Aphrodise Nashimiyamana, who will present the experience from Rwanda. So Aphrodise, he works for the Global Initiative for Environment and Reconciliation, and Rwanda-based NGO working in peace building, conflict negotiation, gender-based and ecosystem management, using integrated approach that leads to community development in Rwanda. He is a journalist and serves as focal point of environmental-based partnership of his organization and international network and donor. So, Aphrodise, the floor is yours.
Hi, Juana. Maybe he's experiencing some technical issues, so maybe we can go with the other panelists and then try to connect again with Aphrodise.
Thanks, Coraina, for that. Probably, yes. Like many African countries always have these internet problems. So hope that we will solve this problem. So then this time I would like to invite Daniela Meireles, who work for an Brazilian FACE organization that is called FACE, and she will present the Quilombola women's resistant eucalyptus plantations in Brazil. Daniela, please, could you introduce yourself?
Bueno, buenos dias, desde cá de Brasil. Antes de mais nada, queria me perdonar por mi portuñol, não muito bom, pero vou tentar falar espaço e espero que entendam. Bueno, eu sou de FASE, é uma organização não governamental de 60 anos em Brasil, que luta pelos princípios de la democracia, justiça ambiental, segurança alimentar. Bueno, nós estamos acá em Espírito Santo, que é uma província em la costa de Brasil, desde onde nós trabalhamos há muito tempo.
Nous travaillons depuis plusieurs années.
De los monocultivos de eucalipto acá. Então, estou muito contenta de, neste dia 21 de setembro, estar com tantas pessoas.
We're happy on September 21st.
Falando dessa problemática. Este dia ha sido criado acá justo em Brasil, junto com esta organização de la Rede Alerta contra o Deserto Verde. Bueno, também estamos também junto com a Rede Latino-Americana contra os monocultivos de árvore. Acá eu hablo de los impactos do conflito com a empresa Suzano, que é a mais larga empresa produtora mundial de celulosa no mundo. E bueno, esta empresa ha sido a mesma, a fibra Antigamente ela era Cruz Celulose, que se cambiaram de nome e agora é esta Suzano. Vou falar sobre a situação em uma municipalidade justo acá ao norte de Espírito Santo, Conceição da Barra, onde 62% da área territorial do município é monocultivo de eucalipto. E a empresa intenta crescer mais 5.000 hectares, já possui 53.000 hectares nesta municipalidade, e intenta crescer com mais 5.000 hectares, justo agora, durante a pandemia, sim, está tentando fazer ajuste com a justiça cá, contrariando os princípios e a ordem do poder público municipal, que diz que não se pode crescer, pero não respeita, esta empresa não respeita as ordens municipais e o poder, é o poder, diz que é o poder e tens que fazer de qualquer forma. Bueno, hablo também sobre as mulheres quilombolas. Quilombolas são os afrodescendentes que vieram para o Brasil como escravos. E se refugiaram e se negaram a ser escravos e justo construíram suas comunidades em los bosques atlânticos, que era neste território havia muito a floresta atlântica cá, com muitos rios, muita fartura. Bueno, lá estavam como 12.000 famílias, cerca de 12.000 famílias vivendo nessas comunidades, quando no ano final dos anos 60, a Cruz Celulose, hoje Suzano, se chegou nesse território e cortou toda a mata e expulsou a maior parte das famílias, só se quedou como 1.200 famílias nesta região norte do Espírito Santo. E as mulheres, sem dúvida, são as que mais sofreram com isto, porque houve muitas perdas, muitas perdas. Bueno, dependiam de todos os recursos e de toda a floresta, eram parte desta floresta atlântica, e como se cambiaram tudo para monocultivos de eucalipto, não tinham mais as madeiras para a cozinha, não tinham mais as plantas para fazer seus cuidados medicinais, não tinha mais nada. E com o tempo, também a perda da água foi grande. Então, esta região, que era uma região farta de água, e muitos rios, e muitos peixes, pescados, bueno, se quedou hoje uma semiárido. É uma região como semiárido, sem água praticamente, depois que os monocultivos se chegaram allá. Então, bueno, foram muitas perdas, perda da segurança alimentar e nutricional, isto é, como a colega ha dito, é muito grave, muito sério, perda de los territorios, perda de las condiciones culturales, ¿sí? Entonces, una situación muy dramática, porque, bueno, también la mayor parte de los hombres, sí, muchos los hombres se fueron a busca de los empleos, porque aunque las empresas digan que van a ofrecer empleos, esto nunca es verdad. Então, nunca los empleos locais se vieram, e os poucos que se quedaram como na motosserra, depois se cambiou com as grandes harvest, grandes máquinas que foram a ser o trabalho de muitos homens. Então, esses poucos empregos se foram. Então, os homens se foram da região e as mulheres se quedaram lá como responsáveis pelas famílias, pela garantia de segurança alimentar e todos os cuidados de las famílias. Então, bueno, tentaram, são muito fortes, muita força que têm essas mulheres que desde sempre han lutado contra a violência e a opressão do sistema, sim? E agora, com os monocultivos de eucalipto, sim, ha tentado também garantir empregos para ela. E quando se reivindicam, se reclamam os empregos para mulheres, que nunca houve, nunca aconteceram. A empresa le oferecem vagas para que apliquem os pesticidas. Isto que lo coube as mulheres fazer, a aplicação de los pesticidas, que são muitos usados como pesticidas proibidos em maior parte dos países, que é aplicado acá como o glifosato. Então, a isto coube as mulheres, e incluso as empresas, a empresa diz, bueno, nós não podemos nos responsabilizar pelos riscos que há nesse trabalho. Se querem, é assim. E assim, bueno, muitas mulheres aceitaram, como não havia condições, há muitos casos de contaminação, muitas situações de doença, de miomas, de tumores em as mulheres. Bueno, há muitas proibições para elas, ¿sí? De cultivos e de práticas em seus territórios que ainda há resistido, como o cultivo de plantas importantes para os usos medicinais, plantas que mantêm ancestralmente importante para a religião e os cultivos medicinais, como é o dendê, que há pouco cultivo para uso doméstico, isso. E a empresa diz que é exótica e, portanto, não se pode plantar. Sim,
Daniela, tienes un minuto más, Daniela, para acabar.
Ok. Bueno, entonces hay como miles de ejemplos de estas restricciones de la vida para las mujeres, como também tentam comercializar e fazer, depois de muita luta, algum comércio com seus produtos locais em las vendas diretas para o governo, pero há um grande racismo aí nisso. As empresas dizem que os produtos não são bons, suficientes e não querem. Então, há miles de exemplos de racismo contra estas mulheres que se mostram as guardiãs da natureza de este território. Sim, são as mulheres que han praticado todo o cuidado e a defesa da natureza e dos rios e dos córregos, sim? Enquanto se há toda esta destruição. Então, as mulheres acá estão ocupando muitos espaços de representação e políticas em municipalidade, em estados, são representantes dos movimentos nacionais quilombolas, são professoras, estudantes, então tem se destacado muito em la defesa de seus territórios quilombolas contra os monocultivos de árvore. Então, aprendemos muito com elas, há como 20 anos que estamos juntos em los territórios, aprendendo com elas e nos inspirando em sua força. Muitas gracias.
Gracias, Daniela. Thanks very much, Daniela, for such a nice presentation. So I would like to invite you, the participants, please write your questions and in the chat or in the Q&A box. But I already have one question, very important question for both presenters, for Daniela, Camila, and Constanza. And the question I have to read is in Spanish, so I will read that question in Spanish that comes from Bolivia. Entonces, la pregunta dice que las mujeres son las principales afectadas por la devastación del medio ambiente, ¿no? Pero las acciones de movilización de las mujeres y las experiencias que han desarrollado, ¿cómo ha permitido atención con políticas públicas que favorecen el acceso de las mujeres indígenas a recursos naturales? Primero Daniela y después Camila o Constanza.
Sí, sin dúvida que as mulheres são as principais afetadas por estes monocultivos. Han tentado muchas movilizaciones acá nesta situação, em Brasil, nesta região que eu estou falando. Elas estão fazendo muitas mobilizações para recuperar seu território. E, bueno, também junto com os homens, sim, pero há uma ação grande e larga de las retomadas. Então, como há mobilizações onde vão para o campo, sacam o eucalipto e se põem a plantar outros cultivos, outras semillas, outros alimentos, tentando reflorestar realmente o território, recuperar a água. E isto sim é uma grande tensão, é claro, com o governo. Acá, ainda mais hoje em dia, bueno, já havia uma grande dificuldade para essas mulheres ter seu território reconhecido, pero agora, mais do que nunca, vivem uma grande tensão
Right
com o poder.
now,
Now
there is a huge political tension over this.
we're living a big tension because of the government, because Bolsonaro doesn't recognize the territories, the Quilombolas
So the
territories.
Quilombola women are trying to do everything so
And
that
we're
their
going to
communities
do
are restored. But still,
what we can to keep the
they
struggle.
can maintain.
Sorry, Daniela. Disculpa, Daniela, voy a interrumpir un momento porque están
Sorry,
avisando
Daniela.
de las participantes que hay dos voces en inglés en la interpretación. Por favor, podrían ponerse de acuerdo porque no pueden, es difícil para los participantes. Gracias. Sigue, Daniela.
Bueno, tal vez porque mi portuñol tenía que ter una traducción también de español. Perdona, eso que puedo. Bueno, entonces sí, esta situación ahora está siendo muy difícil para las comunidades quilombolas como un todo, que están teniendo todos los ataques del gobierno federal, ¿sí? contra ellas. Entonces, una situación muy difícil, pero una resistencia muy fuerte en los territorios.
Y existe una resistencia, and there is a strong resistance in the territories.
Camila, por favor, o Constanza, podrían responder la pregunta.
Bueno, en Chile, desde el Estado, las políticas públicas...
The public policies.
No se te escucha, Constanza.
¿Algo ahí? ¿Se escucha?
Ya, poco mejor.
Sí. Bueno, en Chile, las políticas públicas en el territorio son un poco escasas en el sentido de otorgar territorios a los pueblos originarios, por ejemplo, que son los más afectados en la problemática de las forestales y la escasez de agua. También desde la visión de las políticas públicas se han otorgado
Constanza, un poco más alto, podrías hablar, no se te escucha, disculpa.
¿Ahí se escucha?
Sí, podrías hablar alto.
Bueno, respecto a la pregunta de las mujeres y el territorio, hay escasez de políticas públicas reales. Más que nada se han otorgado algunos derechos a territorios por ser mapuche, pero hay mucha gente que queda fuera de esto. No.
Okay.
Camila, no sé si quieres aportar algo.
Sí, bueno, quizás brevemente aportar como a partir del contexto político en el que estamos hoy en día, que desde octubre del año pasado se está viviendo bueno, se vivió el estallido social, un gran resurgimiento de las políticas, de las bases, de las comunidades, de los pueblos, organizándose para en contra de las políticas del Estado, represivas y neoliberales. Entonces, hoy en día, con el proceso que se nos viene, con un plebiscito, un cambio de la Constitución, es ahí donde se está buscando para poder salir, que haya nuevas propuestas, nuevas políticas en favor de los pueblos, de las comunidades, ya que hay una constitución que viene a partir de la dictadura militar y mira, son trabas bien fuertes que no permiten muchos cambios reales. Entonces, eso creo que es importante mencionar.
Gracias, Camila y Constanza. Tengo una pregunta más para ustedes del público. Voy a leer. Me preguntaría qué pudieran comentar del impacto y la amenaza que significan los monocultivos forestales para las comunidades en Chile, particularmente en lo relacionado con el abastecimiento de agua y el aumento de ocurrencia de mega incendios, y cómo estos factores en contexto de cambio climático ha cambiado el modo de vida de las comunidades y las mujeres en particular. Camila, por favor, o Constanza. Constanza, no se te escucha.
Micrófono. Está apagado.
Ahora sí.
¿Ahí?
Ahí se te escucha. Fuerte, por
Bueno,
favor.
primero aclarar que en Chile el agua es un derecho, no es un derecho, está privatizada a través de concesiones perpetuas otorgadas a privados. Desde ahí lo que acontece es que hay una apropiación desde privados en que el agua no sigue su corriente natural. A la vez, las forestales y los monocultivos gastan un montón de agua. Por lo tanto, las comunidades a sus alrededores se ven afectadas directamente y ocurre la contradicción que en un lugar muy rico en agua, desde la cordillera y un lugar donde llueve mucho, la gente tiene que recurrir a camiones, aljibes que le traigan agua. Por lo tanto, es directamente afectadas las comunidades que están cerca de los monocultivos. También en la problemática de los incendios.
Poco más alto, no se te escucha, por favor.
La problemática de los incendios, a la vez, ocurre como una estrategia del mismo empresario forestal que al quemarse hectáreas de bosque nativo, por ejemplo, queda la apertura a que se instale monocultivo.
Camila, ¿tienes algo más que agregar?
No, junto a lo que dice Constanza, en realidad la escasez de agua, producto de la sequía que hay, que producen las plantaciones, los monocultivos, secan las napas subterráneas, desabasteciendo a las comunidades, también impidiéndoles poder cultivar, no tener agua para los cultivos ni para consumo. El encarecimiento de los alimentos también es una de las consecuencias. Y los incendios yo los relaciono también a esa sequía que producen los monocultivos de pino, y que claro, producen, acá en Chile han habido muchos incendios y que dan paso también a, como dice Constanza, a nuevamente reforestar con más pinos, con más forestales, y que termina alejando a las comunidades.
Gracias, gracias. Hay una interesante pregunta también para ustedes Si los árboles genéticamente manipulados están también plantándose en Chile. Camila.
Hay compañeros que podrían contestar muy bien esta pregunta desde lo técnico, pero sí se está buscando invertir en esas tecnologías. Se están estudiando para hacer estas plantaciones, pero al parecer no es todavía altamente que se esté aplicando.
Okay.
Pero se está invirtiendo en investigar y en llegar a esa tecnología.
Principalmente, ¿me escuchan?
Sí, 1 minuto tienes, Constanza.
Principalmente hay las dos universidades que se dedican un poco a la investigación desarrollo junto a privados, es la Universidad Austral de Chile y la Universidad de Concepción. Entonces ahí hay laboratorios en que se está investigando acerca de las plantaciones transgénicas.
Ok. Gracias por las preguntas. El tiempo amerita. I would like now to invite Aphrodise and give the floor. Nice that Aphrodise could success with connecting. So as I was telling you, Aphrodise works for the Global Initiative for Environment and Reconciliation, a Rwanda-based NGO, working in peace building, conflict resolution, gender-based and ecosystem management. So please, Aphrodise, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. It is my great pleasure to speak at International Day of Struggle Against Monoculture Trees Plantation. This evening, it is an evening here in Rwanda. I'm very honored to join you at this occasion. And I would like to apologize for you that I'm going to put my camera off due to the instability of my network connectivity.
Aphrodise, could you speak a bit louder?
I was saying that I would like to apologize to you that I'm going to put my camera off due to the instability of my network connectivity. Then I will start speaking with my camera off.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much once again. As I have introduced, my name is Aphrodite Chima, and I work for the Global Initiative for Environment and Reconciliation, GR. It's an non-governmental organization based in Rwanda, and GR has been created in 2016 with the mission of contributing to peace and reconciliation process and improving environmental conditions in Rwanda and Great Lakes region as well. And all activities that are being carried out in GR are towards the environmental peace building, where we regard environment as a key factor influencing peace and sustainable development. We empower communities to support their initiative associated with environmental conservation, peace building, and gender-based violence alleviation through capacity building and knowledge exchange dialogues at grassroots level, where our focus are youth and women as the agents of positive changes in their respective communities. First of all, I would like to introduce to you to the current forest situation, forest plantation situation, and the effect it has on women and gender equality. Despite the progress made by the government of Rwanda in environmental management and gender equality, including 30% for women in all decision-making roles, and 64% of parliamentarians being women currently, women still face gender inequalities rooted in limited mindset, especially in rural areas. Rwanda's high population density and growing population means that land is being very intensively used, which is promoting commercial and monoculture trees plantation, while natural forests are under pressure, where it is claimed that forests cover 29% of the country area, but 60% of this tree cover consists of plantations, compared to 40% natural forest. This gap of 20% has a great need on natural forest against the tree plantation. This intensive forest model impacts women in particular due to the fact that they are primarily responsible for two major livelihood activities requiring land and forests. They are involved in farming and providing wood fuel for their homes. The failure of efforts aiming to promote sustainable forest management and the full engagement of local communities, coupled with the long-lasting impacts of the 1994 genocide against Tutsi, means that there is a general lack of awareness amongst the population of the distinction between forests and monoculture trees plantation, and a disconnection between people's relationship with the nature and generational community knowledge gap is leading to the extinction of some species of indigenous trees that are found in natural forest. On top of this, climate change is also having a key influence on the loss of natural forest cover. GRA, as an organization working with communities to support peace building and improve environmental conditions, believe that in order to reduce increasing gap between forest and plantations due to the pressure to increase forest cover by increasing plantation and a poor protection of natural forest plantation, there must be a parallel effort to protect forest and work towards gender equality. Women's participation and voices in community forest management must be increased in order to improve forest governance and sustainability. There should be a joint focus on reducing the deforestation of natural forests, including distinguishing them clearly from their plantations. Excuse me, and raising awareness of the drivers of deforestation and how they impact on women in particular. At the same time, there must be a fight for gender equality in home. There must be a provision of genuinely sustainable cooking alternatives that don't harm women's health, and this should go hand in hand with a campaign calling upon men, especially in rural areas, to do their fair share of domestic.
Aphrodite, you have 1 minute to finish.
Yeah, thank you. This will undoubtedly lead to more attention for genuinely sustainable energy alternatives to go beyond using wood for fuel. These important interventions, we need important interventions that will not only promote women's rights and reduce women's workload, but will also boost natural forest cover, protect biodiversity, and help in climate change mitigation. We seek to use the approach of extracting community knowledge, indigenous knowledge, to provide the information of indigenous species of trees that are being in extinction due to the poor protection of natural forest. We need to use an approach to extract community knowledge and working with indigenous people to promote natural forest protection and conservation by reducing the use of plantation forest as a result of boosting or increasing forest cover. Yeah, I think that's all for my presentation now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aphrodite, for your interesting presentation. I would like to invite to our participants, if you have some questions for Aphrodite. Otherwise, please write your questions in the box of Q&A of in the chat. box. While you are writing your question, I would like to present some concluding ideas from this webinar. And first, before presenting the main concluding message of this webinar, I would like to recall you the statements of a married elder in the rural district of Maraukubing, West Papua, who used to say that in the plantations there is no forest, no freedom, no king, and no real food. In the plantation, there is just hunger and loneliness, no respect for life. So it is clear that the plantation from these different presentations, we could see that the plantation forests have caused more harm than good when it comes to women's livelihood and health, including ecosystem health. The different cases presented in this webinar and published in the Forest Cover, which is launched today, indicate that plantations leads to the deterioration of not only natural elements, but also the social system and local culture, exacerbating gender inequalities, as well as inequalities between groups, between rural and urban, and between geographies. So industrial plantations have displaced communities and capitalized on already insecure land tenure arrangement and exploitation of cheaper and insecure labor. Capitalism rooted in patriarchal system continue flourishing because it's successfully translated environmental damage and poverty on the shoulders of women and marginalized groups, testing their capacity for resilience and resistance, which is already limited by inequality. So I would like also to bring here the main conclusions of what we publish in our forest cover. So that those main conclusions basically are action needed to protect women's rights and communities' rights. And those are like strengthen women's rights group, strengthening women's leadership and break the vicious cycle of the capitalist economy, which places upon the shoulder of women and marginalized groups. Strengthening governance institutions against corporate capture, and support and advocate for the elimination of policies and financial incentives that promote plantations, and supporting alternatives for redirecting these incentives. So also carry out analysis of gender differentiated impacts of monoculture tree plantations. And advocate for policies that enable communities to defend their forest territories and governance and stop militarization of these territories. And also support and advocate for free, prior, and honest and informed consent. And finally, I would like also to bring your attention to that we should focus our action on sustainability of life and organization of society based on values such as the culture of care, not only among people, but also with nature, solidarity, eco-dependence, and equity. And by having said this, I would like really to thank all our presenters from this webinar, and also our participants who participated with such interesting questions. With this, I would like to close this webinar if you don't have any question more. Diego Orazo. Diego says that How could women cooperation help coordinate the restoration of native forests on global scale by direct actions dependent of governments or latitude? I think all these cases, or your question is nicely presented in the cases that we are now launching in our forest cover. Read those nice cases and you will see answer to your question. And thanks very much to all of you.